The next navigation pattern that we're going to be taking a look at is the footer anchor pattern. And this pattern attempts to solve the problem of needing to scroll to the bottom of the page to access the menu. It provides a link that takes you directly down to the navigation. An advantage of this particular method is that the navigation can be as long as you want it to be, and you don't have to worry about a scrolling issue since the navigation does exist at the bottom of the page. On a mobile device, it also tends to give the user best user experience. It's much easier to hit things that are near the bottom of the screen. Disadvantages are that it can be disorientating for users who may not realize what's happened. So this is an example of what our page is going to look like. The navigation is at the top of the page, and it would function like it normally would. Here's the rest of the page. If my browser gets smaller, you can see that the navigation at a certain point jumps to be the navigation icon, and this is pretty traditionally seen these days. And if I click this, it takes me down to the bottom part of the page where I can easily access the navigational buttons. So we're going to be building this page in this particular lesson. To start off with, we're going to use a page that you're already familiar with. It looks like this, and this is just the default behavior. So we don't have any media queries per se, and the navigation isn't really changing at all. Let's go into our code editor and let's begin to build this particular web page. The first thing that we're going to change is we're going to be moving the HTML and adding an additional HTML element. So currently the navigation exists right after the header. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the navigation so that it is going to be at the bottom of the page. I'll just cut my navigational element and I'm going to come down to the bottom of the page, and after my clear div and before the closing section div, I'm going to paste the navigation in. So now the navigation comes at the bottom of the page. I'm also going to add an additional element, and I'm going to put it into my header, and this will be the graphical element that allows the user to jump down to the navigation. So we'll include our graphic in here, and I'm going to assign a class to this navigation menu so I can identify it independently of the other nav tag that I have on my page. And inside the nav tag, we're going to create a link, and we'll just make this link to a null link at this point. And then inside the A tag, I'm going to create an image tag, and the image tag is going to point to an image that I have in my image directory. So you can see I have my nav tag right here. It's going to contain the A tag, which is just a null link currently, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have it display an image tag, and then I'm closing my A tag and closing the nav tag. I'm going to go down into the original navigation that I have, and I'm going to add an ID of the main menu. Once I've done this, I'm going to actually change the null link in my graphic to link to main menu. This will allow this particular link to link down to the main menu. So if we save right now and we look in the browser, you can see that my menu is gone. It's actually been moved to the bottom of the page like so. And if I look in this section, you can see that eventually I get the finger. My graphic is white, so it's not showing up on the white background, but this is where the graphic actually exists, and if I click this, you can see that it jumps me down to the bottom of the page. So the functionality is already working. We just need to make this a little bit more intuitive with our CSS. We'll do that next. We're going to go up to the rules that we have for navigation, and we'll just be altering some of these slightly. The dot navigation rule is going to remain as is, as well as the navigation UL rule that we already have. That will stay the same. I'm going to change my navigation LI rule so that these just display as block level elements. I want these to be stacked vertically on top of each other. In addition to that, I'm going to remove the margin, and I will add a border on the bottom just to separate out the buttons. We'll leave our navigation LI settings as is, and then I'm going to position my graphic. I'm giving this a class name of menu jump. So we'll come back up to where our navigation is, and I'm going to make a new rule for nav.menuJump, and we're going to position this absolute. I'm going to position it right 8 pixels and bottom 8 pixels. If we save and look in the browser, you can now see that my graphic shows up. And if I click this, it takes me to the bottom of the page where you can clearly see my navigational menu. So at a small screen, this is going to work quite nicely. This is doing exactly what we want. It creates a graphic at the small size and takes me down to the bottom of the page where I can easily access the menu options. So now all we have to do is fix what's happening at the large size screen. At the large size screen, I want the menu to be moved up to the top of the page. I don't want it to be stacked vertically, and I want to remove this from this page completely. So we'll go into our existing media query that we already have for the large size screen, and we'll add some new rules. I'll make a comment here, and then we'll begin by making our rules. Well, the first thing that we discussed is that we want the nav of MenuJump to not display at all. So I'll just use a display of none to hide that particular item. Then what we're going to do is we're going to position the dot navigation at the top of the page. And I'll do this by using a position of absolute, top and left values of 0, and I'm going to set the width to 100% so that the gray bar is going to span the entire screen. You can see if I save and refresh in the browser, my navigation now looks like this. Well, obviously it's not working exactly like we want because it's going behind the H1 and it's also obscuring our header navigation. In addition, it's displaying vertically, which we don't want anymore. So let's restructure that next. I'll make a rule for .navigation li. I'm going to change the display back to inline block, and I'm going to remove the border on the bottom. If we save and look in our browser, the navigation is looking much better. You can see though when I resize my browser how the navigational links stay flush left, and that's a result of the 100% rule that we put on the .navigation rule. In order to have this function the way we want, I'm going to add a rule for .navigation UL, and I'm going to specify that I want the max width to be 900 pixels. This is going to match the maximum width that we have on our section tag that we used originally on our page. I'm going to specify margin on the top and the bottom of 0 and right and left of auto. And finally I'm going to add some padding, 0 for the top and 2% for the right and left. Now if we save and look in the browser, you can see that the navigation is positioned the way we want it to be, and if I resize my page, it's always going to keep that same sort of indentation. The final thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to push the header graphic or the header image down a little bit, and I'm going to do that by adding a margin on the top to my header of 1%. So that just creates a little bit of space right there. So now my navigation is working in the way that I want. It's up at the top on the large screen, and when I resize my browser window down, it eventually gets hidden underneath this little menu item, and if I click that, it just takes you to the bottom of the screen where the navigation actually exists. So this is an example of one way that you can create footer navigation.